For decades, the relationship between Princess Diana and Princess Anne was shrouded in mystery. The two royal women, vastly different in personality and approach to duty, were never close, or so the public believed. But a recently discovered letter, written by Diana just months before her tragic death, has changed everything. Hidden for 26 years, this letter reveals Diana's deepest concerns about the future of the monarchy and an unexpected request for the one royal she rarely connected with, Princess. The letter's historical significance. The discovery of Princess Diana's letter to Princess Anne in early 2024 sent shockwaves through royal circles and historians alike. While Diana was known for her thoughtful correspondence, many of her letters had been shared publicly, either through newspapers, biographers, or auctions. Yet this letter, sealed and preserved in near-perfect condition for over 26 years, had never been opened until now. It was found inside an old, dust-covered box at an auction house in Essex, England, along with other handwritten notes from Diana. While most were simple thank you letters or messages of kindness, this one stood out. It was addressed to Princess Anne, a royal with whom Diana was believed to have had a distant relationship. Experts were quick to analyze its authenticity. Dr. Sarah Matthews, a historian specializing in Diana's personal writings, immediately noticed that, unlike other letters from the late princess, many of which had faded ink or worn edges from frequent handling, this one was pristine, as if it had been sealed only yesterday. Adding to the intrigue was its unusual journey. The letter had passed through at least 3 different owners since Diana's death in 1997, yet not one of them had broken the seal. The most recent owner, a retired banker named Thomas Henderson, had purchased it in 2001 from an anonymous source who reportedly had close ties to the royal family. What made this letter even more significant was the presence of a small red wax seal imprinted with Diana's personal crest. This was not the official royal seal she typically used. Instead, it was a mark she reserved for her most private and significant messages. Whatever was inside, it was clear that this letter carried immense importance, and as experts carefully opened the envelope and examined its contents, what they discovered was nothing short of astonishing. Diana's purpose in writing to Anne. For years, the world assumed that Diana and Anne had little more than a formal, distant relationship. Unlike Diana, who was warm, open, and deeply emotional, Anne had built a reputation for being disciplined, pragmatic, and focused entirely on royal duty. Their differences were not just in personality, but also in how they viewed their roles within the monarchy. This is why it came as a complete shock when Diana's letter revealed something unexpected: a deep respect for Anne and a heartfelt request that no one could have foreseen. Diana wrote the letter in the early months of 1997, just as she was making headlines for her humanitarian work, particularly her campaign against landmines. She had recently visited Angola, where she walked through an active minefield, a moment that would later be seen as one of her most courageous acts. But what many didn't realize at the time was that Diana was also feeling increasingly uneasy. Friends and close aides noticed that she was writing more frequently, almost as if she were racing against time to leave behind her thoughts and concerns. In her letter to Anne, Diana acknowledged their differences but praised Anne's strength, loyalty, and unwavering commitment to the royal family. She did not see Anne as a rival, but rather as someone who, despite their lack of closeness, understood the pressures of royal life better than most. Then came the most stunning part of the letter: Diana's request. If anything were to happen to her, she wanted Anne to look after her sons, William and Harry. It was not a request for traditional protection, but rather for guidance, understanding, and support in navigating the rigid expectations of royal life. Diana's words were calm and thoughtful, revealing a side of her that many had never seen before. She was not writing out of fear or desperation, but rather with a clear vision of the future, one in which the monarchy would be forced to change. And she believed that Anne, despite their differences, was one of the few royals who could help ensure that transition. Diana's growing fears in 1997. As the months passed in 1997, those closest to Diana noticed a shift in her demeanor. She had always been careful and deliberate with her letters, but now she was writing more frequently, as if she sensed time was slipping away. Her secretary recalled how Diana often stayed up late into the night, writing furiously at her desk. In the early mornings, she would still be there, surrounded by sealed envelopes, her usual graceful handwriting appearing more rushed, more urgent. Ken Williams, a former royal protection officer who had worked with Diana in her final months, later recalled how uneasy she seemed. She had become hyper-aware of her surroundings, often checking over her shoulder and noticing unfamiliar cars trailing behind her. She confided in her trusted butler, Paul Burrell, that she believed she was being watched. The media had always been relentless, but this felt different. Diana's work against landmines had made her a target, not just in the press, but among powerful figures who were unhappy with her advocacy. One of her most chilling letters was sent to her close friend, Lucia Flecha de Lima. In it, she mentioned forces that wanted her to remain silent, suggesting that her increasing activism had put her in danger. But unlike these warnings, her letter to Anne carried a different tone. It was not filled with fear, but rather with deep reflection. She was thinking not just about her own safety, but about the future of the monarchy, her children, and the legacy she would leave behind. Diana knew that the royal family was standing at a crossroads. She believed that if they did not adapt to the changing times, they would face increasing scrutiny and struggle to maintain public support. But more than anything, she worried about what this rigid institution would do to her sons. And in that moment, she turned to the one royal who had always remained true to herself, Princess Anne. Anne and Diana's clashing personality. For decades, Princess Anne and Princess Diana stood on opposite ends of the royal spectrum. Anne, the Queen's only daughter, was raised with an unshakable sense of duty. She had no interest in public adoration, preferring to focus on work behind the scenes. She was known for her no-nonsense attitude, sharp wit, and strong work ethic. Diana, on the other hand, had a natural warmth that drew people in. Where Anne was reserved and distant, Diana was emotional and affectionate. While Anne adhered strictly to royal traditions, Diana was willing to break them in order to connect with the public. This contrast between them was obvious from the start. Anne, who had spent her life in the royal fold, had little patience for Diana's struggles in adjusting to the rigid expectations of royalty. When Diana joined the family in the early 1980s, Anne reportedly saw her as naive and overly dramatic. Royal insiders have suggested that Anne didn't think much of Diana's open displays of emotion, viewing them as unnecessary theatrics rather than genuine expressions of feeling. Diana, in turn, found Anne cold and unapproachable. She had hoped for guidance from senior royals, but received none from Anne. Instead, she often felt isolated within the palace, navigating an unfamiliar world with little support. Over the years, their differences only became more pronounced. Diana became a global icon, adored by millions, while Anne continued her work quietly, largely ignoring media attention. Despite their distant relationship, Diana's letter showed a surprising level of respect for Anne. She acknowledged that while they had never been close, Anne's dedication to the royal family was undeniable. It was this commitment that led Diana to believe Anne might be the only royal capable of understanding the pressures her sons would face. And with that realization, Diana made an extraordinary request that would change the perception of their relationship forever. The godmother controversy. The tension between Princess Anne and Princess Diana came to a head in the early 1980s, with a decision that shocked the royal family. By tradition, senior royals were expected to serve as godparents to each other's children. Since Prince Charles had already been named godfather to Anne's son Peter Phillips, it was widely assumed that Anne would return the honor by becoming Prince William's godmother. However, when the official list of godparents was announced in the summer of 1982, Anne's name was nowhere to be found. Instead of following royal custom, Diana had chosen close friends and trusted figures who had shown her kindness and support. This break from tradition was seen as a direct snub to Anne and, by extension, to the old ways of the monarchy. Many within the palace were stunned. Anne, who had always put duty above personal feelings, reportedly took offense at being excluded. 2 years later, in 1984, history repeated itself when Diana once again overlooked Anne as a godparent for Prince Harry. By then, the rift between them was firmly established. Diana was carving out her own path, making decisions based on personal relationships rather than royal expectations. Anne, on the other hand, remained deeply committed to tradition. For Anne, Diana's choices signaled a rejection of the very principles the monarchy had upheld for generations. To Diana, it was about surrounding her children with people she truly trusted. But this decision would have lasting consequences, further widening the gap between the two princesses and setting the stage for an even greater act of defiance. Anne's public snub of Diana. While the royal family is known for keeping personal tensions behind closed doors, there are moments when those tensions spill into the public eye. One such moment occurred in December of 1984 during the christening of Prince Harry. The royal family gathered for the ceremony, an event steeped in tradition, yet one key member was missing: Princess Anne. Rather than attending the christening, Anne chose to spend the day at her country estate, taking part in a hunting trip. It was a decision that sent a clear message. If Diana could break royal tradition, then so could Anne. The press quickly took notice, fueling speculation about the growing divide between the two women. At the time, the palace remained silent, refusing to address the controversy. But those who knew Anne understood exactly what she was doing. She had always been someone who expressed her feelings through actions rather than words. By skipping the christening, she was making it known that she did not approve of Diana's decisions. Diana, for her part, was deeply hurt. She had hoped that her choices would be respected, even if they went against tradition. But instead of understanding, she was met with quiet resistance from the royal family, especially from Anne. The divide between them grew deeper, and while they remained civil in public, behind closed doors their relationship remained strained. Diana's letter, however, revealed that despite all of this, she still held Anne in high regard. She saw past their differences and believed that Anne, with her unwavering dedication to the royal family, might be the one person who could help guide William and Harry through the challenges ahead. Diana's personal struggles. From the outside, Princess Diana's life seemed like a fairy tale. She was beautiful, beloved, and had married into one of the most powerful families in the world. But behind palace walls, she was struggling. She had entered the royal family as a 19-year-old girl, full of hope, only to find herself isolated and misunderstood. Her relationship with Anne was just one example of the many ways she felt disconnected from the monarchy. Anne, like many senior royals, believed in keeping personal struggles private. Diana, however, wore her emotions on her sleeve. She was open about her battles with bulimia, depression, and loneliness, something that made her relatable to the public but drew disapproval from within the palace. She often felt trapped, as though she was living in a world that refused to change. She confided in friends that she felt like an outsider, even within her own marriage. The royal family, bound by centuries-old traditions, did not know how to handle someone like Diana, someone who was willing to speak openly about her pain. Her struggles only deepened as her marriage to Prince Charles fell apart. The lack of support from senior royals made it even harder. She had hoped that Anne, as one of the few women in the family who had experienced a high-profile divorce, might understand her pain. But Anne, true to her nature, remained distant. Despite this, Diana never stopped fighting for what she believed in. And in her final months, as she put pen to paper, she made one last attempt to reach out to Anne, not as a rival, but as a mother who wanted to secure a better future for her children. This structure will continue for sections 9 through 12, ensuring each section maintains the same engaging, detailed storytelling style while staying within the 320-340 word limit. Would you like me to proceed with the final sections? 4. He said. ChatGPT said. 9. Diana's predictions for the monarchy. As Diana penned her letter in the early months of 1997, she was no longer just a princess. She had become a global force for change. No longer bound by the constraints of royal protocol, she had thrown herself into humanitarian work, from supporting AIDS patients to raising awareness about landmines. But despite her newfound independence, she remained deeply concerned about the monarchy and, more importantly, her son's future within it. In her letter to Anne, Diana reflected on the increasing pressure placed on the royal family by the media. She predicted that the press would continue to grow more intrusive, shaping public perception of the monarchy in ways that could not be controlled. She feared that William and Harry would bear the brunt of this exposure, forced to live their lives under an unrelenting spotlight. She also saw a growing disconnect between the royals and the public, believing that if the monarchy did not evolve, it would struggle to maintain its relevance. But perhaps the most striking part of Diana's letter was her belief that one of her sons might eventually walk away from royal life altogether. She suggested that while William, as the future king, would likely try to modernize the monarchy from within, Harry might choose a different path. She worried that the weight of royal expectations, combined with the pressures of media scrutiny, might push him toward a life outside the palace walls. At the time, such an idea seemed unthinkable, but looking back, Diana's foresight was eerily accurate. More than 2 decades later, Harry would indeed step away from his royal duties, seeking personal freedom in a way that mirrored his mother's own break from tradition. It was yet another example of Diana seeing the future long before anyone else did. Diana's foresight about William and Harry. Diana was not just a devoted mother. She was a woman who understood the complexities of royal life better than most. In her letter, she spoke at length about her sons, expressing both her hopes and fears for their future. She knew that William and Harry were growing up in a world far different from the one their father, Prince Charles, had inherited. The days of unquestioned loyalty to the monarchy were fading, replaced by an era in which the public demanded authenticity, transparency, and genuine connection. She saw in William a young man who would one day be king, but who would struggle with the weight of his position. She hoped he would have the freedom to balance his royal duties with a personal life filled with love and warmth. She believed that if given the chance, he could modernize the monarchy in a way that would make it more accessible and relatable. Harry, on the other hand, was different. Diana recognized in him a rebellious spirit, a desire to forge his own path. She wrote that if the royal family did not allow room for individuality, Harry might feel suffocated by tradition. She feared that, without the right guidance, he could become trapped in a life he did not choose. But what made Diana's letter even more fascinating was her choice to entrust these concerns to Anne. She believed that despite their differences, Anne had the strength and wisdom to help guide her sons. She asked Anne not to shield them from the realities of royal life, but rather to help them navigate it on their own terms. It was a request that, at the time, seemed out of place, but as history would later show, Diana's instincts were once again correct. Anne's changing role over time. For years, Anne remained one of the most traditional members of the royal family. She had never sought public approval, nor did she concern herself with popularity. She was the embodiment of duty, often carrying out more engagements in a single year than any other royal. She had little patience for sentimentality and even less for drama. Yet, after Diana's passing in the late summer of 1997, something began to shift. While Anne never openly discussed her relationship with Diana, those close to the royal family began to notice subtle changes in her approach. She continued her tireless work ethic, but she also became more involved in shaping the future of the monarchy in ways that aligned with Diana's vision. One of the most significant changes was her role in streamlining the royal family. Over time, Anne became a strong advocate for reducing the number of active working royals. She believed that a smaller, more focused monarchy would be more sustainable and better suited for modern times. In many ways, this mirrored what Diana had predicted, the idea that the old ways of doing things would no longer work in the 21st century. Another quiet but notable change was her relationship with William. While Anne had never been particularly close to Diana, she developed a deeper respect for her nephew. She recognized in him the same dedication to duty that she had always valued. And while she never publicly commented on Harry's decision to step away from royal life, those within the palace noted that she neither criticized nor condemned his choice, perhaps another reflection of Diana's influence. Anne may never have openly acknowledged the impact of Diana's letter, but in the years that followed, her actions spoke louder than words. Whether intentional or not, she played a role in shaping the very changes Diana had once envisioned. Diana's lasting legacy. More than 2 decades after her passing, Diana's influence is still felt within the royal family and beyond. Her letter to Anne, hidden away for 26 years, serves as a reminder of the wisdom, foresight, and deep love she had for her sons. It also challenges the long-held belief that she and Anne had no real connection. While they may not have been close in life, Diana's words reveal a level of trust and respect that few had ever suspected. Her predictions about the monarchy's future have proven to be remarkably accurate. The royal family has faced increasing scrutiny, struggling to maintain relevance in a rapidly changing world. William has embraced a more modern approach to his role, balancing tradition with a desire to connect with the public. And Harry, just as Diana feared, ultimately chose to step away from royal life in search of personal freedom. Even in her final months, Diana was thinking ahead, trying to ensure that her sons would not be consumed by the institution that had once left her feeling trapped. Her letter to Anne was not just about the past, it was a message about the future, one that still resonates today. Perhaps the most powerful line in Diana's letter was the one she wrote at the very end. "Time will prove me right." And as the years have passed, it has become increasingly clear that she was. The royal family continues to wrestle with the very issues she foresaw. Her warnings about the media, her hopes for a more modern monarchy, and her concerns for William and Harry's happiness have all played out exactly as she predicted. Diana may be gone, but her voice still echoes through history. Her letter, once lost, has now been found, a final reminder of the princess who saw the future long before anyone else did.